एक ओंकार सतनाम करता पुरख निरभव निर्वैर अकाल मूर्त जुनी सहबान गुर प्रसाद जप आद सच जगात सच है भी सच नानक भी सच एक अद्वितीय गुरु नानक देवा ओंकार गुरु अंगद पेवा सतनाम गुरु अमर प्यारे करता रामदास गुरबारे पुरख श्री अर्जन सुखदानी निरभव हर गोबिंद गुण खानी निर्वैर गुरु है श्री हर राय अकाल मूर्त हर कृष्ण ते आए अजुनी तेग बहादुर राय सहबान गुर दसमें सहाय गुर प्रसाद ग्रंथ गुरु ज्ञान वाहे गुरु बंदन भगवान गुरु ग्रंथ काल जुग प्रयो श्री गुरु रूप महान 10 पातशाह एह रूप है गुरु ग्रंथ जी जान पूर्ण देखियो आत्मा द्वैत सर्वनिवार पै शांतमान शांते तेन पद नमो हमार मुकुच शास्त्र खाट पेंगरन छट जाए अंत लिखे बदरो स्नेह जो काल कृपा कराए कहाँ बुद्ध प्राप्त तुच्छ हमारी बरन सके मैं अमा जो तिहारी हम ना सत्कार से तुम्हारी आप ले हो तुम कथा सुधारी सो कहो टल गुरु सेविया निस सहज सभाए दर्शन परस्या गुरु के जन्म मरण दुख जाए दर्शन परस्या गुरु के जन्म मरण दुख जाए
सतनाम श्री वाहिगुरु साहिब जी हुक्मी होवन आकार हुक्म न कहे आ जाए हुक्मी होवन जी हुक्म मलय वड़ियाई हुक्मी उत्तम नीच हुक्म लिख दुख सुख पाई है एक ना हुक्मी बख्शीस एक हुक्मी सदा पवाई है हुक्म अंदर सब को बाहर हुक्म ना कोय नानक हुक्म जे बुझे ताहो मैं कहे ना कोय
वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह Guru Rup Satsang Ji, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Today we commence the Katha of the second body of the Sri Japji Sahib. We are 42 videos in so far, and we have just covered the Mool Mantra Sahib and the first body. And today we're going to continue on with the Katha within the second body. We're going to go through the definitions of the Sampardaic. We're going to go through some of the definitions now within Santamir Singh Ji Satugaliwala Tika. Those definitions will be very similar to some of those found within the Taksali Tika as well, which we will go over, but there are some minor differences and discrepancies which we'll go through. And I think it's worth noting and having the Katha of both Tika done at the same time, so you get all the definitions, because there are many definitions, especially when it comes to the third body, the Gave Kotan, Hove Kisantan. Within that body, the definitions that are found within the Sattugali Tika are not found within the Sampardaic Tika by Damdam Taksal. And I think it's essential for the Vidyarthi, the learner, to understand and realise that Gurbani is agadable, it is endless. It is endless in its definitions, but it's easy to read. It is completely different from the Vedas, which is very difficult to read, but its definitions are only singular. There are no multiple definitions. And here we're going to carry on. We're going to carry on with the second body, and the Sidhs were talking to Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji, who are having a discourse with him upon Mount Samir, or Parvat Samir. They sat on that mount, and the Sidhs asked Guru Nanak Dev Ji, said, look, this Paramatma who you've spoken about, according to the Vedas and Shastras, he is written, he is defined, he is spoken about, and he is eulogized about. But tell us about his hukum. Hukum here we talk about command, his will, his direct influence. And so the Sidhs are asking Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji about the divine will of God. Tell us about the divine will of God, the command of God. And Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji replies,
Hukmi hovan akar, hukum na kahya jai.
He said, look, that Paramatma that you're talking about, this Paramatma that you mention, it says, Hukmi hovan akar. He said, his eulogy that we're trying to speak about, hukum na kahya jai. The problem is you cannot talk about his will, the shape of his will, the type of his will. It's very difficult to eulogize and bring into comprehension the will of God. And after hearing this, the Sidh said, look, that isn't what we like to hear, because if we hear that it cannot be defined, it opens something up to atheism or intrigue or discussion and dispute. So it said, look, with your ability, give us some sort of comprehension of Waheguru. This Waheguru that you talked about, you've said it is through the Shakti, through the Ik Onkar, through the mantra of Waheguru that you have come here. So explain to us something about the will of God. And then Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji continued.
Hukmi hovan ji, hukum Hukmi hovan akar.
Maharaj said, Hukmi hovan akar. They said, look, the reason why, if you want to define the will of God, we do it through things that we can see. The first one is Hukmi. Hukmi is the one who gives the command, who has the will. So Waheguru. Within his will and command is the akar. Akar usually is translated to forms. Here, akar is split into three. And the era and akar, the is defined as Vishnu, the deity Vishnu. Ka is the one who creates, and that is defined as Brahma. Ra is Rudra. Rudra is also known as Shiva. They say, look, you need to understand, within the will of God, he is the one who creates the form of the three deities of the Hindu Trinity. So that is the first definition that Guru Nanak Dev Ji gives to the Sidhs to make them understand about Hukmi Hovan Akar. The second one, he says, look, the realms of the deities, Vishnu Puri, Brahm Puri, Shiv Puri, all the Puriya that are made, all the domains that are made, all their created forms are created by God, and it is through his will. And then the next definition is the individuals who worship these three deities, or worship all of these deities, all of their forms are created by God. It is within his will that he creates them and he destroys them. And then the last one is Hukmi. Hukm again, like I said, Hukmi is the person whose will. And here we're talking about Vaheguru. According to Vaheguru's will, it is the child that takes birth and is formed within the womb of the mother. And it is from there that the bodies take shape. Obviously modern science has changed that in the way that we now have test tube babies for self-fertilization. We have all sorts of other techniques that science is playing with. But still again, it is through the will of God that these techniques are taking place. The creation of the form of the human being still takes place according to the will. It does not matter about the modern day genetics, the modern day approaches of science. Everything is within his will. He gives the ability for people to understand and to have that creative responsibility, to help creation, to help parents have children. And it is through the will of God that this takes place. And Gurbani states, Hukmi sagal kare akar, ape jane sarv vichar. So it says it, and it says, Hukmi sagal kare akar. Everything, all of the creation, all the forms are created in accordance to the will of God. And then Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji continued.
Hukmi hovan ji, hukum male vadiyai.
They said, look, it's according to the will of God that a person, Hukmi hovan jiya. They say it's according to the will of God that somebody takes birth. It is according to the will of God that somebody stays within the womb, meditating upon God, hoping for that divine birth, of the human birth to be taken place. And it is through his will that that person survives. There are many fetuses that die within the womb. There are many that die at birth. It is according to the will of God that that jeev is placed within the body and takes birth. And according to the will of God, then that individual gains glory within their life. Many people are born into poverty. They're born into families of poverty, and they become so famous within the world. And it's according to the will of God, it's according to his hukum, that those individuals gain this individual praise within the world. And some people are praised within this world, and they gain vidya in the next world as well. The sants, the sadhus, the bhagats, they gain a manifestation within this world. They are worshipped within this world, and they are praised afterwards as well. And Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji continues.
Hukmi uttam neech.
They say, look, it is according to Parmeshwar's will, it is according to the will of Waheguru, that some people become great from being low. Some people like Balmik Bhatvara, he was a saint from the times of Mahabharata. He's mentioned who was a robber, who was initially a robber, and he was given fame. It was according to the will of God. Again, you look at Lakhu Darvi. He was a robber. he gained great fame. Bhai Bidhi Chand Sinna Guru Ka Sinna. That was what Sri Guru Har Gobind Ji said to him. This was somebody who was, later on a Sakhi will come, where Bhai Bidhi Chand was out stealing, and it was Bhai Adli Ji who brought them to Sri Guru Arjan Dev Ji. From being a low individual of status, where they were committing acts of sin, they became such a great Gursikh of the Guru. They fought in battles that their name is remembered today. Their name is remembered today through their lineage. Baba Avtar Singh Ji are going around the world, but still everybody remembers them as Bhai Bidhi Chand's ansabans, their lineage. So Maharaj states here, they say, Hukam-i uttam neech. They say, according to the Hukam, a person can become great from being low. And then they also say, according to the will of God, a person who is high can become low at any point. And again, you'll have a Sakhi later on. We'll mention some of these Sakhis, these stories later on. But you had Shah Jahan, who was an emperor of the Mughal Empire, and he laughed when he heard Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Gurbani mentioning that somebody could be a king one day and eat grass the next. He laughed at Gurbani and said, how could this ever take place? And then when Aurangzeb finally decided to declare a dictatorship and take over the throne of the Mughal Empire, at that point he had his father imprisoned. His father only had a certain amount of food to eat every day, a certain amount of water to eat every day, but one day he was starving so much that he forcefully fell off a horse that was carrying him from one place to another, and he ate the grass on the floor. And then he remembered the words of Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji and cried, realizing that Gurbani was it was the truth. There was no doubt in its factual points that he went from being the greatest sultan to being an individual who was eating grass and imprisoned. And Gurbani states that Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, this is the Hukam of God. I can't tell you about God, but through his Hukam he can make the low high, and he can make the high low within a moment. And it says, Gurbani states, Nicho Jukare Mera Govind Kahu Tena Dare. It states that within Gurbani. And Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji continues on explaining the Hukam of Vaheguru.
Hukam lik duk sukh paiye.
We say according to the will, according to the writ that is written on an individual's forehead before they take birth within this world. They say it is already written where a person will gain suffering and where they will gain bliss. And this is already written there, and Maharaj says this is the will of God, this is the Hukam of God. So we can't talk about God themselves, but you can see from the individuals within this world, those people who gain praise, they gain praise because of their writ, because of their karam. And those people who gain suffering, they gain it because of their karam as well. And Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji continues,
Ikana hukmi baksis, ik hukmi sada pavaiye.
It is through the will of God, Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji states, that some people are blessed and they are given the position and titles of elevated roles, such as kingsmanship. There is a Sakhi that comes within Sri Guru Nanak Prakash, where Guru Nanak Dev Ji are with Bhai Mardana and Bhai Balaji, where they are sat there at night, and a young child comes, and he comes and sees that the Pasha is there, Guru Nanak Dev Ji is there, and Guru Nanak Dev Ji is then fed by this individual who is a child. He is clothed, they're given clothes, and this individual decides to do the Sangat of the Sadhus, goes home to his parents, gets food, brings it back. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji then bestows on it and calls him Sultana. They call him a king, not just any king. A Sultan is a person who has control over all the other kings. And what happened that night was basically the king in the region had passed away. The ministers were all wise, they wouldn't take the seat themselves. There was no lineage to offer the seat to. They decided to close the 4 doors of the city. And their divine will was the person who comes, the first person who enters the gates of that city in the morning would be crowned king. Guru Nanak Dev Ji said those divine words, called this child a sultan. This child went home in order to get more stuff for the Guru, and he was the first one outside the city, and he was blessed as the sultan at such a young age. And Bhai Mardana and Bhai Balaji asked this at the time, said, why did you call him a sultan? And they said, because it's within his will, it's written. And here it says, Ikana hukumi baksis, iko hukumi sadapavaya. People are blessed, they propagate all these things. And it's through these sorts of things that a person gains praise in this world. And Maharaj then says, Iko hukumi sadapavaya. It says, according to the will of God, it is that an individual stays within the cycle of transmigration, the cycle of birth and death. Charasi Lakajun, the 8.4 million lives and species that a person has to go through. It is through that a person always has to remain within there. However, this is where certain people then start to doubt Gurbani and say, well, if I'm trapped in Charasi Lakajun, it's all the will of God. God has put me in this, and He's trapped me in here. No, that isn't the case. God has put you within Charasi Lakajun. He is giving you this opportunity. In Gurbani it states that He has given you this opportunity in this human life in order to escape. This is the chance, that's the escape. This is the exit door is available to you. And Vaheguru has given the hukum to put you in there in order for you to gain this opportunity. And it is within this human life that you have the opportunity to try to escape this. Through Bhakti, through Nishkam Seva, through Bibig, through Virag, through the things that we talked about yesterday within the Sadhan rooms. And it is through that a person can get out of Charasi Lakajun. And it is within here, it says, for those individuals who are trapped, this is the opportunity for a person to get out as well. The Sidhs then listened to this and they said, okay, you've talked about those people who are, within the will of God. Is there anybody who is exempt from this? And Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji continue.
Hukum hai andar sab ko, bahar hukum na koi.
Maharaj says, look, everything within creation, within the creation of God, is within the will of God. There is nobody that is outside. There is nobody who else is omnipresent. There's nobody else who is not going to die. Everybody must die. Maya must die. Everything must come to an end. The world must come to an end. Everything is within the will of God. It is akars. Everything has a form. God has created forms. Everything that is nirgun is Brahm. But even things that we don't see, microscopic levels, have forms. But Maharaj states here, everything is within the will of God. Everything. And there is nothing that is outside the will of God. Hukum sab, it says it, Hukumi sabbe upajay, Hukumi kar kamai. Gurbani states in there in Siddhi Rag, it goes into everything's within Hukum. Within Ramkali Divar again, the 3 Ramkali Divars, in the second one it talks about Hukum again. Within the Hukum it states, look, it is through the will that everybody is here, it's through the will that everything takes place. Nothing is outside of the will of God. The only thing that is outside of the will of God is God alone, because He is the will. He forces the will. He is the will. But He is exempt from it as well. And the Sidhs then said, look, okay, we understand, you state that everything is within the will. But they said, look, if a father has 5 sons, but all of them are acceptance to the will of their God, their father. And when the time comes of the father's death, and everything is split 5 ways, is it in the same way that when an individual, when God sees His own children suffering or in happiness, is it not God who gives them this suffering? Because He can take away this pain. But Guru Nanak Dev Ji explains to them that everything is according to the karmic retribution. It is according to karma that everything takes place. And it is for that reason that a person suffers. It isn't due to God despising an individual. This is not like the Semitic faiths. The Semitic faiths have many, many instances where God gives afflictions to people, or allows people to suffer afflictions and pain. The Sakhi of Ayub, who is a prophet within the Quran, or Job, as he's known within the Bible, he suffers great afflictions because God and the devil have a bet to see if a person is righteous or not. according to Gurbani, that doesn't take place. That doesn't happen at all. According to Gurbani, it is through the karmic actions of an individual that a person suffers. It is due to the attachment to the world that a person suffers. And that's what it is. So, what here Guru Nanak Dev Ji say is, look, a person should accept the will of God, accept the hukum of God. They shouldn't be worried about, like a father gives out certain things, you know, and if he sees a person suffering, he helps them, this and that. God does help them, but a person has to help themselves as well. So, it is through the strength and the ability of God that the hukum continues. And everybody is within the will of God. And then the Sidhs asked, they said, okay, we understand that the Jeeves are within the will of God. We understand this because you've told us this. And through the examples that we've given, we understand that everybody and everything within creation is stuck in the will of God. And Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji said, look, the people who do not accept the will of God, those people who do not understand the will of God, they go through the following. What I say is, listen. What I say is,
Nanak hukme je bujhe ta hume kahe na koi.
They said, look, if the individual decides to go with the will of God, live their life according to the will of God, and renounce their own ego and pride, then their life would be easy because they won't have any pride, they won't have any issues, they will accept the will of God, and they will be happy all of the time. A person would be happy whether they are suffering any afflictions or they gain praise. There are Sakya coming later on where it talks about individuals who suffer and gain praise. There's a Sakya later on where Sri Guru Arjan Dev Ji sends one of their Sikhs to Gujarat to stay with a Sikh whose son ends up dying after being married, and he stays within the same state. He's never angry, he's never sad, he's never upset. And Maharaj states that if a person gives up their ego, lives within the will of God, then they will never suffer. And that's the first definitions of this body, and we're going to leave that here for today, and next time we'll continue on. Kamalpreet Singh, if you can read the Gurbani, then we'll do the Mangals, please.
Hukmi hovan akar, hukum na kahya jai. Hukmi hovan ji, hukum mile vadiyai. Hukmi uttum neech, hukum likh dukh sukh paiya. Ik na hukmi baksis, ek hukmi sada pavaiya. Hukum hai andar sab ko, bahar hukum na koi. Nanak hukme je bujhe, ta hume kahe na koi.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. He Gobind, He Gopal, He Dayal Lal, Prananath Anath Sakhe, Dina Dard Nivar. He Samrat Agam Purana Mohe Mayata, Andakupa Mahapayana Nanak Pade Utar. Hai Prabhu Saranagati Kirpa Nid Dayal. Ek akhar har man vaste nanak hot nihal. Ek akhar har man vaste nanak hot nihal. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.